things. And it all begins with the suspect himself. He lived and worked among us, in society, functioning as an architect, husband and father, commuting from Massapequa into New York City. From there, however, much of what we learned seems to fit the mold of a serial killer. A strange home in a neighborhood which seemed out of place, awkward interactions with people, and a large interest in the Long Island killings. He's been accused of killing 6 victims from Gilgo Beach, and now investigators speaking publicly again today about another victim. Is this unknown victim connected to the suspected Long Island serial killer? We have all the latest. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Great to have you aboard, and we've got news to talk about here relative to the suspected Long Island serial killer. And I want to begin with the original Gilgo 4, it's now 6, the long wait for justice. Because first, these women were missing. I don't know how in-depth the search was for these victims, but finally the bodies were discovered, and then it took time and time and time to try to put the pieces of this mystery together. And some people suspected, well, because the victims were, you know, women who worked in a certain industry, that maybe everybody wasn't working so hard to get to the answer. That's not the story today, but there was this long wait for justice, and a big part of it was because of police corruption and the prior chief, who shut out outside agencies from helping and sort of squashed and kept investigators from making a lot of progress in that case because of his own issues and his own problems. So that really was the major bump in the road that cost years, because those in charge of the investigation didn't want the investigation to go forward and had their own legal problems and want to keep the FBI away from everything that was happening out there. But there was public pressure. A lot of it was led by this man, Johnny Ray, has been on the show a bunch of times, an attorney who represented the original woman who went missing, that created the search that uncovered all of these women, all of these victims, all of these bodies that were found and remains. So you had a combination of public pressure. He's representing families, families coming forward saying, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why aren't we getting an answer? And then the media picked it up a little bit as well and continued with that pressure. And then finally there was a task force that was put in place. Finally. And once that task force was put in place, it didn't take a long time for them to get to a suspect here. It really didn't. It was months. It wasn't years. You put the task force together, you actually try to solve the crime, and guess what? You make an arrest. And they did, the suspected killer. And the question that we really have at this point is, how many victims are there that prosecutors believe they can connect to this man? We've got 6. We know there are 10 bodies out there, remains from 10 different people. And are there remains anywhere else, whether it's Long Island or somewhere else in this country? The investigation has been much different since that task force took over. Now, I want to show you something that was uncovered from the accused Long Island serial killer's search history. This is from a search warrant on an email connected to one of his alleged burner phones. I'm going to show you what that search was. Take a look at it, because we have it for you. Asian twink tied up porn. That was apparently one of these searches associated to one of the suspects, the defendant's burner phones. Why is that significant? Why is that significant? Well, it's significant because of what happened today. One of the victims of this from the beginning we've known maybe didn't quite fit, or maybe did fit the profile of the suspected Long Island serial killer. Well, you take a look at that search and take a listen to what they want the focus to be right now, where they need help in trying to solve a case, and it involves one of the people whose remains have been found who has not yet been identified and is being referred to as the Asian Doe. Take a listen to the latest update from today from the task force as they try to solve all of these cases.
With regard to the initial investigation in this case, the remains of Asian Doe were discovered on April 4th, 2011. They were found, the skeletal remains were found on Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach in New York. I believe found in between, just closest to Megan Waterman. The initial examination revealed the following. The victim was a biological male of Asian descent. The victim was between the ages of 17 and 23. So there he was a teenager or very young adult when the murder occurred. And he was about 5'6" tall, give or take a couple of inches either way. Unfortunately, this victim suffered a violent death. The cause of death was homicide by blunt force trauma. We know the death occurred during or prior to 2006, and that those remains were on Ocean Beach for at least 5 years before being discovered in 2011. So the actual murder occurred based on the forensic examination of the remains in 2006 or earlier. Some of this information is being released for the first time, specifically the descriptions of the clothes that Asian Doe was wearing at the time of death, and that although Asian Doe was a biological male, Asian Doe was wearing exclusively women's clothing. He was wearing a chrysanthemum brand blue-ribbed short sleeve shirt with a crew neck, size large. He was wearing a Raffaello brand shirt, size 10, and he was wearing a pair of women's pants and a bra, both by the brand Build Glass. And with regard to the forensic reconstruction images, the task force was able to work with National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, and a forensic artist examined the victim's skull to create the facial reconstructions that you see here. And those reconstructions depict what the victim may have looked like prior to their disappearance and murder. We have two pictures of a person with short hair, one head on and one in profile. And we have a third picture of an individual with long hair. Because the victim was wearing exclusively women's clothing at the time of death, it is possible that they identified as a woman or were known by others as being a woman. The Gilgo Beach Task Force also utilized genetic genealogy to learn more about this victim's specific ethnicity. It was previously known that this victim was of Asian descent. However, now we know that it is a strong likelihood that the victim is of Southern Chinese descent, Han Chinese descent, and Han Chinese is one of the 56 officially recognized ethnicities in the People's Republic of China. This is a significant development because, unfortunately, South Asia is underrepresented in our genealogy databases, meaning there are not a lot of Asian profiles in the database. Therefore, investigative genetic genealogy in this instance is a challenge. It's a challenge to identify this victim, and so far it has proved to be difficult and has provided few leads. Hence, the purpose for us being here today. We're looking for the media's assistance, and we're looking for the public's assistance in helping us provide information on this victim to get this victim's name back. Again, this person had a name, this person had family, this person had friends. We're reaching out to anyone who might have known this individual to help us with that identification. Again, I would just add with regard to DNA databases, those who would like to help identify Asian Doe or any other victim or missing persons in the Asian or any other community to help, you can upload your DNA to Family Tree DNA. and into Jet Match Pro and opt into law enforcement matching. You know, contrary to popular opinion, law enforcement doesn't have access to all DNA databases, and this identification, this IgG technology that we use, as you can see, we don't just utilize it to identify suspects. We also use it to identify victims and to provide closure to the families of missing victims. If you really want to help, please consider uploading your DNA profile into those 2 commercial databases, which allow law enforcement to access that information, but only with the consent of the consumer. Now, third, we ask that if you were around in the late 90s and early 2000s, think about the people you associated with. Think about the people you know. Did anyone of Asian descent go missing? We believe Asian Doe may have been working as a sex worker around the time of their disappearance prior to 2006. We believe that they spent some time in New York City prior to their death. And we want to urge the public, don't discount someone just because you know them to be from somewhere outside of New York City. As we know, people often come to New York City for a myriad of reasons. So, you know, we have a bail document which details some of the internet searches done by the defendant, and some did contain searches using similar terms that you just described.
Were there any similarities in the way that this body was disposed of with those that were left nearby? And, I mean, are you considering Rex Heuermann a suspect in this case?
So if you look at, you know, where it was situated, I think it was about 300 or so feet from Megan Waterman in that same stretch of Parkway. So it was between Megan Waterman and Jessica Taylor. And, you know, as we've said all along, each one of these these victims, it's a separate crime scene. Start from that separate crime scene and you work your way up, which we're doing. And, you know, it's all nice to speculate, but it basically doesn't matter until you can bring charges on. We're certainly not at that stage. I don't know what that means. We start from our victim. We start from our crime scene. We work our way out, and you know we don't talk about it until we're able to charge them.
So to clarify, you said you're testing other evidence from the scene. Is there other physical evidence suggesting, you know, somebody else linking somebody else to that scene other than the victim?
There's always physical evidence, and you know you work through the physical evidence. You utilize the various modalities. Those modalities are changing, evolving. So it's a continuing process, and until that process is complete, you know, you don't discuss it. So we're not at that stage where we're prepared to discuss it, but there's always a myriad of physical evidence at any scene. It's just whether or not it's relevant or not, or it's able to be tested.
So some new information today about Asian Doe, biological male, but women's clothing, maybe identified as a woman at the time. It's not quite clear. They believe murder in 2006, but not found until 2011. But the big part of that was they're trying to do it through genealogy, and they're asking people of Asian descent to upload their DNA to help in this search. So how do you do that? What's the likelihood of success? Let me bring in my experts. Joining us tonight, Laboratory Director for Pure Gold Forensics. She has more than 20 years of experience in DNA analysis. Forensic DNA expert Susanna Ryan. Also with us, President of Identifiers International. She's an internationally recognized forensic genealogist with a PhD in nuclear physics. Forensic DNA expert Colleen Fitzpatrick. Thank you both for joining us tonight. Really do appreciate it. Let me start with you, Susanna. Kind of give us the... Looking at this particular case, right? You've got someone who no one has come forward to identify, has some Asian descent here, and they've got DNA, but they've kind of run into a roadblock here. So what's the process here in trying to track down the identity of this victim?
Well, yeah, there's certainly going to be some challenges with this case, just based upon the fact that, as was stated in the press conference, there really aren't that many Asian individuals in the genealogy databases. And so the more individuals we have in that database, the higher the likelihood that we're going to have a matching profile and be able to find a relative of that unidentified person.
How close of a relative can you track down, Susanna? How close does someone have to be for there to be, okay, this is someone that's connected?
Well, certainly there can be very distant relatives, but that makes it much more difficult when you're trying to build out that family tree and identify a person. So it would be great if a profile was able to be uploaded and you find a nice close relative. That makes it certainly very simple. But oftentimes they're just very distant relatives, and that's going to take a lot of time for the genealogists to have to work with and build a family tree, try to determine who might be connected to that missing person.
Now, Colleen, this could be an international search. We don't know if he came to this country, himself, first generation, or if he'd been here for many generations. That's not clear. But it seemed that investigators were tracing his genealogy somehow to South China, South Asia. How about China? Do they cooperate in this? Do they have a database that they just don't allow outsiders to access, or does it not even exist?
No, there's two parts to this. The first thing we do when we get a case is we check ethnicity, because over time, there's been scientific databases created with markers from different countries or different ethnicities. And so what we do is we just look at the markers. There's no genealogy at this point. It's just, are his SNPs, his markers, do they match, these French, German, UK, Caucasian, European? And my guess is they were Asian, they're Asian markers. And then there was enough markers on the Han Chinese collected in the scientific databases to be able to say he was Han Chinese. There's no genealogy at that point. Then once you know that, you go and you look at the DNA cousins, we call them, the matches. And my guess is they had very distant matches because there aren't very many Asians in that database, proportionally speaking.
And how do the databases work, like worldwide here? Is there one huge database? Does each country control a database? Are they privately held? How is all this information kept, Colleen?
Well, there's only two real databases that we use for forensic genetic genealogy. One is Family Tree DNA database, and one is GEDmatch. Now, genealogy per se is an American hobby. Those databases are basically composed of Caucasian European Americans, I'd say the highest proportion, that because essentially we don't really know where we come from. I know I'm from Ireland, but I don't know who my relatives are back there, and I'd like to find out. So generally speaking, Caucasian European middle-class people with disposable income to do genealogy and time to kind of make it a serious hobby. So for that reason, there are people, there have been attempts, to get more people from, say, other English-speaking countries like Australia, the UK, Ireland, to kind of go into the database. But some of the other, in Canada, but some of the other countries, really lack that. China is one of them. And also in Europe in various countries, you have the GDPR, you have certain privacy agreements that, and in some cases, this is not allowed at all. So, those countries tend to be lacking. China is one of them.
Okay, I'm going to ask each of you the same question. Susanna, 0 to 10, what do you think are the chances that they'll be able to get a match here this way? Not with someone coming forward saying, oh, that was my brother who went missing back in 2006, but through the genealogy. 0 to 10, 10 being, oh, yeah, they're going to do it. 0 meaning no chance.
At this point, because I'm sure they've already attempted it and they're not identifying the person, I still think that there's a possibility. So I would say maybe a 6. I think that and if individuals keep adding their profiles, right, that's the best way to build these databases and someone might enter a profile tomorrow that is a distant relative of this person and give a name to this individual.
Colleen, what are your thoughts about 0 to 10 here on identifying Asian Doe?
I'd say it really, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'd say it's depends on the response to the solicitation. I think without it, maybe 1 or 2, because I don't know what the data looks like, but I think it's probably pretty distant. I'd say 1 or 2, but like Suzanne said, you don't know what the response to this is. Could be a family recognizes their family member and voluntarily gets involved. You don't know that, and that's the purpose of this announcement.
Absolutely. Well, Susanna Ryan, Colleen Fitzpatrick, it's amazing work that you guys do, and we appreciate your time and your expertise tonight. Hopefully we get a solution to all this. When we come back, we're going to bring in our think tank, get their reaction to all the news coming in the Gilgo Beach investigation, plus coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates the murder of FSU law professor Dan Markel. This week, his ex-mother-in-law Donna Adelson goes on trial, and we investigate the family dynamics that led to murder.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan.
In every story, in every trial, every case, there's at least 2 sides to it.
To dive into the latest.
Oh my God.
And breaking true crime stories.
This was a very targeted, very personal attack.
Inside.
I've never seen that in Discovery. I've been incarcerated 3 years.
And outside of the courtroom.
She's a psychopath.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central. Only on Court TV.
State police. Yeah, there's somebody after me. I'm sorry? There's somebody after me.
This is a 13-year case, so as you saw, we have a great deal of information, evidence, photographs, reports.
This case is a case that we're going to try in a courtroom. The press has convicted my client without seeing a shred of evidence.
She had no idea any of this was going on, or the allegations were even, her husband was a suspect.
The charges in the indictment are just allegations, so this is the first step in the process of proving those allegations.
The Long Island serial killer, the suspected one. More information today in that investigation released. They are now trying to identify the Asian Doe, and they're looking for the help from the public, which tells me a lot. Tells me a lot about where they are in that part of the case. But the Long Island serial killer is facing charges relative to 6 of the victims. And this victim, Asian Doe, was about 300 feet from one of the original Gilgo 4. So there is a connection there. Let's bring in our think tank, see what they think about these big developments. Joining us tonight, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III. Also with us, criminal defense attorney Darnell Crossland and family law attorney Jennifer Brandt. Great to see everyone. Al, I'm looking at this latest development. What does your gut tell you on this one? Is Asian Doe connected to the suspected Long Island serial killer? They say that he may have been a sex worker. He was dressed as a woman, and we know we go back to the search history, allegedly connected to a burner phone, connected to the suspected killer. He did a little search for Asian twink tied up porn. So do those pieces give you enough to think, hey, maybe, just maybe, this guy is connected to this murder as well?
Well, we have to be thankful that this horrendous human being put together a diary of deviancy, which gives us sort of a veritable cornucopia of perverse debauchery. And on it, you see TS escorts Manhattan, which is transsexuals, and on it you see young twink tied up porn. Okay, so the unfortunate victim fits into that category, a transsexual young male, and the description would put him into that category of twink. And it certainly does look to me that it is conceivable that this young man is a victim of this, serial killer. There's no way that this list puts down every type of porn possible and every type of person involved in porn possible. It's horrendous. I mean, reading it is just, it's just gut-wrenching. And, you know, this young man, quite unfortunate in a situation. I hope that they can find out who he is. I'm not overly confident that they're going to be able to find out who he is, because especially in, you know, that the Asian population with regards to this type of behavior, I don't know any family that's going to be looking for him, unfortunately. I think it's going to be a very sad circumstance with this, but I hope that we can find out who he is and link him to the serial killer and let this man be found guilty of everything.
Darnell, those are a couple of the big facts here, right? That no family member has come forward. You know, you go back to 2006 is when they believe that he was murdered, so he would be missing in 2006, and to this day now we've got this image that they've put together, and that's new as well. All this information. Darnell, what are your thoughts here?
I'm glad you asked, Vinny. My initial thoughts are, when I heard Al speaking, I thought he was VP Wunsch with that word salad that he shared with us in the beginning there. But in terms of this case, you got to remember, after the investigation is over, we're heading to court. And when we head to court, we looked at what's reliable. So we have the Daubert test that talks about reliable scientific evidence. I've had a trial where we couldn't really use DNA, so we had to go to what they call Powerplex Y, which kind of breaks up genetic markers. I won that trial, just in case Al's listening. But it was very scientific in terms of seeing mutations, et cetera. Now we're looking at genetics and trying to figure this thing out. They say in Asian Doe as opposed to Jane and John Doe, which is unknown male or female. And I'm assuming this is because of the way this person identified. So we have so many layers on top of layers. Scientific stuff, what's going to be admissible? How do we find this person? This person identifies as a female but may have been a male. What's their lineage? So unlike the experts that were on earlier, I'm going to say 50-50 in terms of them cracking this case, because this goes beyond the pale of what we normally see in these type of scientific matters.
Yeah, Jennifer Brandt, there's a lot of levels of tragedy here, right? The bodies and the remains are discovered, and then for years nothing really happens. Now the investigation is going, and we're seeing some progress. But to me, once I hear law enforcement like reaching out saying, hey, we need some help now, we really need your help, that does not give me a lot of hope necessarily in this one.
Right, I agree with you, Vinny. I mean, this person has been gone for a long time, and no one's reached out that we know. I mean, but don't forget, this investigation was cold for a long time. These victims were gone for a long time, and while some of them had families looking for them, a lot of people just didn't know where their loved ones were until this became more public. The press got a bit involved, and you know, there was more attention on the actual crimes that occurred. So maybe now with police talking about it, we're getting it out even on this show and in the press. Maybe people will come forward, someone will come forward, you know, missing their loved one. In addition, the killer himself, or the alleged killer himself, kept a lot of records and details about his escapades, apparently. So maybe through some of that, ties can be drawn to this person. So I'm sure law enforcement is looking into that and trying their best to see if they can tie these two together and find out who this victim was.
Yeah, the other part of this one, every time I look at that map, is the proximity where the remains are. And it's like 300 feet away. So it's the closest of the non-Gilgo 4 victims. The Gilgo 4 are the first 4 who are discovered. And then you can see you've got remains found further and further away, but the remains of Asian Doe are the closest to the Gilgo 4, Al. So that's another huge factor, I think, here, because is this the dumping grounds for, killers everywhere, or is there one particular killer who knows this is an area where I can dispose of remains and nobody ever finds them?
Well, that's the whole thing. You want a spot that you're going to be comfortable in unloading a body, and that serial killers are creatures of habit. And so, you will look into one area, and if that area has worked for you in the past, you're going to keep going until, obviously, you get caught. It is something that is very, very, very likely that this young man, ran into this guy and is a victim. It's just that I don't know if we're ever going to find out who he is. There's nothing. The police have already looked through the records to see any missing persons on this.
Right. So no one reported Asian Doe missing. Period.
And no friends, nobody in the escort service, nobody has reported him. But what is blowing my mind about this case, Vinny, is that like every couple of months we get a different list from this guy as to things that have gone on, his shopping list, his do's and don'ts, and now, his diary of deviancy that is going on with this guy. I'm still wondering what else we're going to be seeing in the next 6 months when they start releasing other information.
Okay, Think Tank staying with us. We've got more to get to. Oh, Darnell, go ahead. You have 15 seconds, pal.
I just want to add that there's a cultural dynamic here. So perhaps because of the Asian culture, no one's come forward because, again, a lot of times this is very embarrassing in their culture. In typical white or black or otherwise, we might have come forward quicker. And I think that's important.
I already said that.
Okay.
You did?
You guys are confirming one another tonight. That's good. That's a good step forward for you guys. When we come back, there he is, the suspected Idaho student's killer. Brand new mugshot, looking a little different, putting on a little weight. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Yeah, the whole thing is really strange. I grew up in Moscow.